Moving on to our final chapter for this morning, chapter 26. If Jesus was serious, then we will love with our actions, not merely our feelings. So by now we see that Jesus is clear throughout these verses that we are to love our enemies and love our neighbors. But what exactly does this look like? There are different types of love. One of my favorite Bible Project videos that I stumbled across this week, I wanted to share with you. It was one of the Advent videos on love, and it shows what love means to Jesus. And I think we can learn a lot from it, so I'd love to take a couple minutes and watch it together. So a couple things that I really love about that video. Tim Mackey shares with us that in the Greek translation, when they were trying to define the love of Jesus, they didn't use dictionaries, they didn't use translators. They did it by watching Jesus' actions, listening to his words, and then finding the best word in their language to fit that. So Jesus literally defines agape love. This is a love that is sacrificial, and it's humble. It's based on action, not the mushy feelings that we see in our rom-coms today. It's a difficult love. It's actively seeing what is in our enemy's best interest. It's hard enough to love our neighbors like this on a good day. But what about our enemies? Skye says that this love is to will the good of another person, even when there is no benefit to us. This agape love goes beyond our feelings. It requires continuous actions. It's not just a one-time deal. Jesus calls us to constantly be putting others first, not just our own wants. Again, as Tim Mackey said in the video, it's not just loving those who can offer us something in return. Jesus calls us to love those who will respond to our love with more annoyance to us. But love them anyways. Do good for them anyways. This agape love isn't just to cope with our enemies. Jesus is calling us to turn our enemies into our neighbors. He's taking the distinct groups that the Jews had used in their laws that they created, the neighbor versus the enemy. And he's challenging us to make no distinction between the two. That's what agape love is. So what are we doing to turn our enemies into our neighbors? What actions can we take to reach out to those that annoy us? As Skye mentioned in chapter 24, our first step can be prayer. Praying for our enemies and praying for God's grace and power in our lives to take these actions. One of my favorite songs is by Ellie Holcomb, and it's called Canyon. And the bridge goes like this. I walked into the desert and I found you. You set a table for me in the presence of my enemies, to share with my enemies. No longer my enemies, no longer my enemies. God has poured out his agape love onto us. This love is for us, but it's also for us to share with those around us. And in loving those around us with his love, we can turn our enemies into our neighbors. I'll leave you with one more quote by Scott McKnight. His Sermon on the Mount commentary was just so good. He says, we can't do this being loving our enemies. So we can't do this by saying that we'll do it or saying we believe it, but by extending in concrete actions the love of God for all to others. We need to ask who our enemies are and get busy converting them into our neighbors. And we will discover that God is already there. God's agape love is already with our enemies. We just need God's eyes to see it.